In this video, we're gonna go side by side and compare $80 Soviet lenses against some $8,000 anamorphic lenses to really see the difference. I'll break down the process of how we shot a cinematic sequence at sunset and look at the features that make each style of lens so unique, to hopefully get a better understanding of why these old cheap lenses are becoming so popular. Now before we go side by side to show you the difference, let me talk about these lenses. These are vintage style lenses and mine are rehoused. Now my buddy has a few Atlas lenses, which are anamorphic, high-end cinema glass. Now what I wanted to do is put these two different lenses up side by side to really see the difference between them and to really see like which lens do you prefer? Because there are some characteristics when you're using old vintage style lenses that make them super unique. There's also some characteristics that make anamorphic lenses super unique. And what's surprising is that these old vintage lenses were used on the set of Dune 2 recently. There was a lot of cinematographers who turned to old vintage glass because of the characteristics that you get out of working with some of these lenses. Now, the two that I have are rehoused. This is a Mirror 1V 37mm, and it's a f2.8, and this is a Helios 442 f2. Now, inside is the cheap glass. Now, you could get a mirror for like $100 if you go on eBay. Helios 442, you could get some pretty bad versions of it for like 50 bucks. And there's usually a range. Like if there's a better version of these vintage lenses, they tend to be a little bit more expensive. But overall, a few $100s for a piece of vintage glass that can give you some really cool looking footage. I went on Etsy, I found this company BTF lenses. They're 3D printed with cinema gears so that I could use these like a normal cinema lens. And I did another video where I shot an entire sequence using these lenses, and I'll include that in the description if you want to check it out. I worked with the DJI Focus Pro so that I could have autofocus on vintage lenses, which is wild. However, for this video, I want to take these lenses and compare them alongside my buddy's Atlas lenses, because it's wild how expensive lenses can get when you start getting up into that upper level of cinema glass. And so we were out in Joshua Tree shooting a bunch of content, and as the sun started dipping low in the sky, we thought this would be the perfect time to do a side-by-side comparison. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you side-by-side both of these lenses, and we're gonna take it through a series of shots. And this is how we would shoot a cinematic sequence. And the whole idea behind this is to cut a cool little sequence of the van pulling up, my buddy jumping out, cutting some firewood, starting a fire, and kind of getting ready for the evening. This could be a good transition moment if you are someone who's making this style content outdoor adventure, or you could use this for something like a short or an Instagram reel, just something fun. And so I'm gonna walk you through the process of how we shot the sequence while also comparing these side by side. And at the end of this video, I'll play both sequences back to back. And I'd love to hear from you what you think about these cheap lenses, how they stack up next to some really expensive lenses. Looks good. Okay, so ZVE1, A93, Atlas Anamorphic 36, Soviet lens 37, and he's got a Sackler, and I've got, my Alonzi. That's the setup. Welcome to inside my Jeep. So over here, I have power, and I have my 3 battery charger, Peter Lindgren version. And I can just keep my batteries plugged in back here. I need to build some sort of like battery wall back here. But this is all powered off of another big battery that's in the back, and I have solar on top of the Jeep. So I basically have power wherever I go. So I needed to move my Jeep because it's in the perfect spot where we wanted to film. But this is the footage straight from the ZVE1 with the Atlas 36mm. And you can see how there is a squeeze on this footage straight from camera. Now here's the shot from the MIR 37mm. And you can see it's a spherical lens, so I don't need to do any de-squeeze in the editing software to be able to use this lens. And right away you can see the characteristics of this lens with the different lens flares and the out of focus regions. And you're starting to notice that, yeah, it has some character to it. And when we take the 36mm and we de-squeeze it, you'll see that you have a different style of flares, and the footage does have a different look to it.
You have the travel tripod, I have the travel body. It's fine. It works out. Complimentary.
So for the first shot in our sequence, we had Braden get out of his van and walk over to the door. And because of where the sun was positioned in the sky, we could get this shot with it just peeking over the van, which gives us a great opportunity to see the flare between both of these lenses. Now, moving forward in this video, what I'm going to do is put black bars on top and bottom of the vintage lenses so that we could see the difference between the spherical lens and the anamorphic lens in the same frame size.
So you're going to grab logs. I'm just going to grab these logs, put them on the ground here, and then once they land on the ground, we can have the cameras kind of a close-up, diagonal to the van, because we have front, side, and then we can go diagonal.
Longer lens or?
Yeah, we should do a longer lens. Maybe we'll do that after we chop the wood. I know the close focus is really good, so I kind of want to do the for the chopping, or maybe a longer one into the van.
Yeah, or even coming through that window, looking this way. You could, I mean, this could be cool too, looking through here.
Yeah.
If we like brought this down. Ooh, look at that flare. If you like we're right here and you're in the van with this window down.
That'd be cool. Yeah, we can do that for sure.
As they say in the movies, action. So the sequence that we're building is basically Braden getting out of his van, pulling some logs out, and starting a fire in a small stove before he drives off after sunset. So it's a very simple sequence, but it gives us that opportunity to get a variety of shots to test these lenses while also filming throughout the sunset into blue hour. We rolling? We're rolling. All right, hold on. Let me reset a little bit on this one so it matches. Yeah, if you're going to be there, then it's just... You're on, no, you're good. I'm on spherical, you're on anamorphic, so it's like, yeah. All right, go for it. When shooting any sort of visual story, showing the process from a variety of angles is a great way to keep your viewer interested. If we just put the camera in one spot and had Braden go through this entire sequence, it wouldn't be the most exciting video. But going in for close-ups, getting wide shots, getting medium shots, and piecing it all together makes the most ordinary task feel like a movie. All right, so I'm gonna just chime in here real quick, because I want to talk about the difference between anamorphic lenses and spherical lenses. And this is why filmmakers will choose an anamorphic lens, is these specific characteristics. Now, I made a whole nother video about anamorphic lenses, and in that video, I talked about the 5 characteristics. So instead of repeating myself, I'm going to play this segment because it really shows you what makes anamorphic lenses so unique. And then after, let's talk about vintage lenses and why filmmakers are choosing to use these over anamorphics. So here's the 5 characteristics. So the first one, and the one that we see all the time, are lens flares. Anamorphic lenses have more pieces of glass and they have curved pieces of glass. So when light hits the lens, it creates lens flares, especially when you're shooting directly into your light source, you'll see these different streaks. And the blue lens flare has become like the standard for the cinematic look because of a set of lenses that a lot of movies are made on. Now, the second thing that changes with these lenses is the bokeh, so the space that's out of focus in the background. Any sort of orb that you'd see on a spherical lens, like if you have lights in the background, they're typically circles. But because you're squishing the image, those circles now become ovals. And then also there's what's called the waterfall effect, where the out of focus sections have this painted quality. So the bokeh actually puts more emphasis on what is in focus because the elements that are out of focus are less recognizable and they actually look more blurry and stretched out, so you can't really tell what it is. Now, the third quality of these lenses is there's organic roll-off. Because of this waterfall bokeh, the sections that are in focus to the sections that are out of focus have more of a gradual roll-off, whereas when you're shooting on spherical lenses, especially with the new cameras and new lenses that are coming out, it's very sharp. So right now you can see that I'm super sharp and my edges are super clean. I'm shooting on the Sony a7S Mark III on my 35mm at 1.8, and I have a very distinct border around me where it almost looks green screened from the background. And the more out of focus that you have, so if I was shooting at like a 1.2, the more that this effect would be present. But when you're using anamorphic lenses, there's less of the sharpness, which gives it a much more smooth feeling overall. Now, the fourth reason that these lenses are unique is the X to Y axis. So I've been working with the Siri Anamorphic lenses. They have a 1.33 squeeze. And on these lenses, it's like having a 50mm top to bottom and a 35 side to side. And let me show you what I mean by that. Now this is shot on a 35mm spherical lens. Now to get the same background perspective, take a look at the fish on the left and the tree on the right. You have to shoot on a 50mm anamorphic lens. And when you de-squeeze the anamorphic, you get that image of a 35 side to side, but a 50mm top to bottom. It's a different style of perspective and distortion in the background. And this is definitely much more present on a 2x anamorphic. Now the fifth pillar of anamorphic lenses is how the rack focus works. Because you're squeezing the image, when you rack focus from the foreground to the background, there's actually a stretching effect that happens on the image and it almost feels like it's moving without actually physically moving the camera. And the big thing with anamorphic lenses is overall, the image just feels more organic and less clinical. When you're shooting on anamorphics, it's just not as clean. There's more distortion, there's more chromatic abrasion. When you move to the edges of frame, it's just not as clean. And then you have all of these factors that look different than spherical lenses. The only reason that we think this looks more cinematic than the spherical lenses that we're using now is because we've seen it in the movies. We've grown up watching all these big blockbuster films shot on anamorphic lenses, and that look has been ingrained in us, and when we see it, it makes us feel like it's more of a film rather than a video. Now, I'm just gonna pause the video real quick, and I just wanna tell you about the Creator Film School, which is my course that teaches you everything that you need to learn to be able to make videos like this and build a channel like this. So if this is something that you're interested in, I'll put a link down below in the description for you to check out. It takes you from A to Z, everything you need to know to grow a channel, make videos, learn everything about cameras. Let's jump back in. Now, when you're looking at anamorphic versus spherical lenses, oftentimes people are talking about anamorphics versus like new lenses, not necessarily vintage lenses, because vintage lenses have a lot of these same characteristics that you find with the anamorphic. They're not perfect, so you're gonna have some different things going on in the background. The focus might not be perfect in ways, so you will have some issues with the lens, which also give it some character. Now also, the big thing with vintage lenses is that you're gonna have flares. So you're not gonna have that stretched out beam that I was talking about with the anamorphic lenses. However, you're gonna have some interesting, unique flares that are very specific to each lens, which is why people seek out specific lenses. You can tell with this Mirror 1V 37mm, you get some crazy lens flares with this. And for me personally, I prefer the look of the vintage lens flares than the beam across. You could mimic that beam if you put just a filter in front of a spherical lens, but the big difference, and something that you're gonna notice as we keep going along with these shots, is that when you work with anamorphic, you have that stretch where it's one focal length width, but then one focal length to the height. So let's jump back, let's do a few more shots, and let me show you our process and kind of show these as we're going through what they look like.
What we should do besides,
what do you think?
Sun. Yeah, I think we're good. Like the sun is about to go away, so I think we can transition to we don't have any smoke in the sun. That's kind of what I was hoping for.
Get it going right now and we can get a shot of it.
It takes a little bit to get the stove going, but I think it'll still look good. We can backlight it with something. We'll get creative. I already have pre-broken wood on this thing.
Right, longer lenses. So 55. You have a what?
72.
Okay, so he has a 72 anamorphic, and I got a Helios 442 58mm. So a little bit different. Huh? Could do that. So slightly different, but I could also play around with APS-C mode. But there also is a difference when it comes to anamorphic versus spherical, because anamorphic's wider. So even though a 50 is a 50 on both, it's not technically a 50 on both. It has it acts differently. Sorry, this footage is terrible. I'm trying to get lenses before we lose sun. For this next shot, we have Braden in his van and he's getting the fire started. And what you're seeing is from the Atlas Mercury 72mm. This is the full width of this lens. Now let me freeze frame this for 1 second and let me show you how we set this one up. you could see we have a little bit of sunlight coming out of the front window, and we have the fire going in the middle of the frame. However, on the left side of the frame, it was a little bit too dark, so we actually stuck a Aperture MC up on the ceiling to just give a little bit of light in the back of the van to give a little bit of illumination. So when we see this shot playing, it looks natural. However, we did add a little bit of light. Now here's the same shot on my Helios 442 58mm, and this is without the black bars on top and bottom. Now let's compare these two side by side if we were to punch in on the Atlas Mercury 72mm. So if you wanted to fill the frame and not have bars on top and bottom, you can punch in on the Atlas Mercury footage. And now you can see the difference when we play these side by side, not using the full anamorphic stretch of the Atlas Mercury.
This is why you shouldn't have a bag of all your rigging stuff, because then you can't find things. Like I bought two MC Pros, like the newer version of these, and they're in my bag somewhere. I just don't know where.
So as we're waiting for the sun to go down, tell us your strategy for making videos. Like, is this typically what you do?
Yeah, it's pretty standard. Like, find a cool spot. I've been using, like, all my videos I've posted so far have been on the 42mm Mercury, and I just exchanged it for the 36 and the 72. So I feel like my videos are gonna get better now. But yeah, just like these lenses are amazing. I like the look.
What's your thought process behind making these videos? Like, what's your intent?
Yeah, well, I just want the highest quality footage while having like the least amount of gear. And I do have so much gear, but I'm weaning down. I'm trying to become a minimalist a little bit. And these lenses aren't quite in line with my minimalism, but the footage, like every time I use them, I actually get excited about filmmaking, where before, nothing against like photo lenses are great. I just don't really take photos anymore, and I only take video. And this, I don't know what it is about anamorphic. I think it's the fact that like on a 72, this lens width-wise is acting like a 48mm, where the compression you get, so you know, like GoPros make the mountains look like super far away, where a telephoto lens brings the mountains and they tower above. So that's what it kind of brings everything in the background in. So you're getting the compression of a 72, but you're getting the width of a 48, which I think is pretty cool. On a 36, you're getting the width of a 24mm, which works so well on a gimbal, where you're still getting the compression of a 36, and you're not getting like kind of like the wide angle, like kind of warpiness or distortion. I didn't even know what anamorphic was. I just knew that it had some kind of like movie look, and now I feel like all my footage looks like the movies, which is pretty sweet.
Like it feels cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
I hate overusing that word, but like it does feel cinematic. Like there's these things we do that trigger that emotion that we're watching like a cool movie. Anamorphic kind of has that feeling.
And the flares are obviously one big distinguish it from other lenses. You get those horizontal flares.
There's like different things you can do that will make your videos just feel more like movies versus feeling like videos.
And like, this isn't going to make all your footage look amazing right away. Like, you still have to wait for nice light, have good compositions. Like, we backed up this lens from the van all the way back here because we were trying to make stylistic choices to make the footage look better. So, but it just like gets me closer to what I want. And like, I'm a very perfectionist, and this isn't like a very perfect lens. It has a lot of character to it, and like barrel distortion. I really like how the edges kind of like get pushed in, but like are circular a little bit. I really like that. And yeah, at the end of the day, it gets me the footage that I like. And it's kind of the opposite of where the trend is going. Everybody's shooting vertical. I'm shooting like ultra skinny, but
So at this time of year, we don't have a whole lot of time for sunset, but we were able to grab a few shots of the smoke coming out of the van. So with the first one, we got this ultra wide shot, but filmed with a long lens, so you get tons of compression. And then for the second shot, we wanted to get in front of the van and get a little bit of flaring with the headlights. And you can see here with the Atlas Mercury, you get that nice beam flare that comes from anamorphic style lenses. Now, when you switch over to the vintage style lenses, you see that you just don't get the same width when you're shooting at the same distance. And it doesn't have the same cinematic feel that the anamorphic lens has when you compare them side by side. Now, if I was to move my camera back and shoot this from a little bit further away, I could get that same width, and then I could throw the bars on top and bottom and be able to get something that's somewhat similar. Now, when you go to the front, you can see that you don't get the same type of lens flare from the headlights, but you do get a little bit different type of lens flare, which is something that I particularly like with these vintage lenses. However, this was pretty much it for sunset, so we wanted to switch and get a few more shots before it got completely dark.
And your van died.
Yeah. Temperamental when it first starts up.
With the sun almost completely gone, we got this last shot of the van coming up and over the ridgeline, and this really shows the lens flares between both lenses. Now, something kind of cool is up in the upper right-hand corner. This is smoke from a SpaceX launch that had happened this night, and you can actually see it in the anamorphic frame. Now, when I switch over to the spherical vintage lens, you could see how much more cropped in it is, and you don't actually see the SpaceX launch in the distance. But this is what I can get with this Helios 442, and this is what the lens flares look like with this kind of coloring.
All right, so it's blue hour. I'm trying to get the last couple shots. When it's super blue like this, when you have a light that's orange, like headlights or the fire, it just has such a cool look. So that's why we wanted to wait until right now. So when you go around the corner there, you'll basically be out, so.
Yeah. Maybe I'll try to turn around and come back, and then we'll end it there.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All right.
You think I can just start from here? Should I get a bit of a run up?
You could start from here. You're out of frame. Okay. Turn your lights on. Yeah, I will.
Sweet, thank you.
Now, blue hour is a very tricky time of day to shoot because you have so little time to grab the shots that you need. And throughout this period of time, the light is fading super fast. However, I really like shooting at this time of day because the entire frame is very cool except for any lights that you add. So for this shot, we have the van, which has very warm lights, and you create this really cool color contrast between the orange and the blues in the frame. Okay, so now we've gone through and shot everything that we need. Let's combine this together, put the same color grade on both, try to match them as close as possible. Let's really see how these look when played back side to side. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to add black bars on top and bottom of the spherical lens so that it matches the anamorphic squeeze, but it's gonna give you the same kind of look. And oftentimes when working with spherical lenses, you'll either crop the top and bottom or add the black bars to give you that cinematic look. Now, I know it's not the same thing as shooting anamorphic, but because we're comparing these side by side, let's put those bars on, because instantly that's gonna make a huge difference between anamorphic and spherical. But if we can make these match as close as possible, we'll really see the characteristics of the lenses and really see what we like from each, whether it's the vintage or it's the anamorphic. So I'm gonna play both of these videos back to back, and let me know in the comments which one you prefer, and also what are some things that you're noticing of these vintage lenses versus the anamorphic ones. there still is a bit of work that goes into being able to work with these lenses, especially in the run and gun style. If you're someone like me who's going out on adventures, trying to get shots quick, and there's a lot going on, working with vintage lenses or anamorphic lenses is just adding a layer of something you have to worry about, something you have to think about. And it might not necessarily be the best choice. Oftentimes, it's just easier to work with, say Sony glass, because I work with Sony cameras, and it's just gonna be easier overall, and I could focus more on the story and getting good shots with that glass than focused on necessarily like specific flares or specific looks or trying to get that anamorphic look. It just depends on how you want to film. And there's no right or wrong way. So it really comes down to what process you wanna do, what look you want, and what you enjoy using without like overcomplicating the whole thing. Now next you should check out this video right here, which is all around storytelling, which making cool visuals is great, but story is really what's gonna keep your audience watching your videos longer. So make sure you check out that video.